Hello and welcome to the second part of this series. In this video, we're going to create a user class in Python and set up the user signup functionality. So let's get started. The first thing we want to do is create a new folder in the project, and we'll call this user. The first file in here will be __init__.py. This will let us treat the user folder as a Python module that we can import into other Python files. The init Python file doesn't actually have to have any content for this to work. So we'll close that. And let's create the second file called routes.py. This will contain all of our routes related to the user. So for example, user/signup, user/login, etc. And the third file will be for the class, so we'll call this models.py. So let's start here. The first thing we need to do is import Flask. So again, we'll type from Flask import Flask. And then we'll create a user class and a signup method. And each method on a class in Python needs the instance of the class passed in as the first parameter. So we do that by typing self. All right, so the first thing we should do is create an object to represent the user. So we'll say user equals, and then we'll do an ID here. We're going to do _ID because MongoDB uses this as its key for IDs. So we'll leave that blank for the moment, and then we'll create a name, and what else? Email, and password. All right, let's just make this method return this empty object to start with. All right, and we probably want this to come back in a JSON format, so let's use JSONify. Now this is a Flask function, so we have to import it from Flask, just like that. All right, and if it's successful, we can actually return a status code of 200, so we can do that by doing comma 200. For failed calls or errored calls, we're going to return 400. All right, so let's save this as a success for now, and let's create a route so we can access this in the browser to test it. So let's go to routes.py. And again, we have to import Flask. And in order to create routes, we need the app instance. So if we go back to app.py, this is where we create the Flask app. So the word app is an instance of Flask. So we need to import this instance into our routes file. Now this is going to look a little redundant, but we're going to say from app import app. And what this is doing is it's from the app file or module, which is this file here, import app, which is this. So from app.py, import app. And now that we have it in our routes file, we can create a new app route. So we'll do @app.route. And this first one will just be user/signup. Now we can specify methods allowed on this route. So let's do that. We'll say methods equal, let's type get. We're going to change this to a post-only route in a little bit, but so we can test in the browser, let's leave it as get for now. Let's create a function called signup. Now what we want to do when someone goes to this route is run this class method. So we have to import this class into our routes file. So what we want to do is import that user class. So we can say from user.models import user. And what this is doing is it's saying from user, this directory, import models, which is this file, and then from that file import user, which is our class. So we're importing the user class into our routes file. And once we have that in here, we can use it in this function. So this route is going to return user dot signup. And this is creating a new class instance. We could do this similarly like this, and then type user down here. But it's kind of nice in this case just to do it all in one line. All right, so let's test this in the browser. Let's go to user/signup. All right, that is not found for some reason. And that is because if we go to app.py, which is what starts the Flask app, it knows nothing about our user routes. So we have to import our routes into our main app file. So let's do that here. We'll say from user import routes. So from the user folder, import everything in routes. So we'll save that and refresh. Okay, so we got one error here. It doesn't know what methons are. So that's a typo. So let's go to that file and check it out. Here we go. Methods. All right, let's go back and refresh. Cool, there we go. We are getting a blank user object back from our API. All right, so before we go any further here, let's create the sign up form on the homepage. So let's go back to the homepage template and let's create the form here. If you took a look at the style sheet, you'll see I have a few classes for different elements. You don't have to know what they are. You can just follow along right here and we'll create some nicely styled elements. So this will be our create an account card. And we'll have a form here. The form will have a name of sign up form. And we'll have a few fields. So let's create a label. This will be for the name field. And this will be an input type text. The name will be name. We'll give it a class name of field so that it gets styled. And we'll say this is required. Let's copy this and use something similar for each of our next fields. So this will be email. This will be password. And then we'll create a submit button with the text sign up. And we'll give this a class of btn, so it's a nicely styled button. And finally, I'm going to create an empty paragraph here for our errors. It's blank now and it's hidden now, but if there are errors, we're going to write some JavaScript to insert them into this so that we can see it on the front end. All right, let's save this and take a look in the browser. And there we go. We have a styled form here ready to go. So let's write some quick JavaScript to make this form submit to our new user/signup route. So let's go to static.js, scripts.js, and we're just going to use jQuery because it's quick and easy. Usually I use Vue or React or something else, but you really can't beat jQuery for just writing something quickly that works cross-browser. So let's handle the form submission. We're going to find a form with a name of sign up form. And when it's submitted, run this function. We're going to get the event so that we can prevent default form behavior, which would be submitting to the page itself or to another page and refreshing, which we don't want. And let's create a few variables here. We're going to create a variable for the error DOM element so that we can insert some text if there's an error. And this is going to be a data object, which gets all the fields from the form, bundles them up so we can send them off to our backend, our user/signup route. And finally, an AJAX call. To our user signup route. We want the type to be post. The data will be the data object. Data type will be JSON. If it's successful, we'll return this to the console for now. And if there's an error, we'll return that. All right, let's test this out. We'll go here and refresh, and I'm going to open up the console here to the network tab so we can see what happens. Let's sign up. And we got an error 405. All right, the method is not allowed. So let's go back to our routes file. And that is because we are only accepting GET requests. So let's change that to POST, like I promised we'd do earlier. And go back here and resubmit. Looks like we have a success. Yes, we're getting the data object back, or the blank user object back. So now let's modify this so that we actually get the fields that were submitted, this data, and just return that back. So we'll go back to our models.py file. And instead of blank strings, let's get it from the request data. So this will be the name field. And this here, which we're getting from the form data, matches up with this, the name attribute on each of the fields. And in order to actually use request, we need to import this from Flask. So let's do that here. And then I'll copy this for the email and then for password. We're going to create a unique ID for the ID field here in a moment. But let's just test this out. Save that, back to the browser, and sign up. Cool, there we go. It is making it all the way through and then back to us again. So let's create a unique ID here for each new user. So if you don't pass in an _ID to MongoDB, it will create an object ID for you. Now, object IDs are a little trickier to work with if you haven't worked with them before, so we're just going to give it a unique ID of our own. So in order to do that, we're going to import UUID. And then we'll use it here. UUID4. And then we'll just get the hex of that. And you'll see what this looks like right now. Let's test it out. All right, there we go. Let's post again. Different ID, again, fresh ID. Perfect. So if you want to test and debug as you're going, you can print this to the console. So let's type print request.form and open up our console here so we can see it. And let's go back to the browser and sign up. And there you go. You can see that what happens is we get this dictionary back with the name, the email, and the password. And then we generate an ID on the back end. Perfect, so let's hide that. And let's give this a little heading here, a little comment. Cool, so the next thing we want to do actually is encrypt the password so we're not saving in the database as plain text. So to do that, we're going to use the passlib library we installed before. So let's import that here. So from passlib.hash import. And then we'll use this down below. So we want to get the user password from here, right? This new user object will get the password and we'll set it to something else. we will use this function. We'll use passlib to encrypt it. And let's test this out now. Sign up. All right, and there is our plain text password coming back encrypted, ready for the database. So the next thing we need to do is actually connect to the Mongo database. So let's go to our app.py file and create some database configuration. So first we need to import PyMongo. So we'll do that right here. And then we need to create a PyMongo client instance. So we'll say client equals pymongo.mongo client. And then we have to pass two things in. The first is going to be the host, which for me is localhost. Yours might be 127.0.0.1. And then we need to pass in the port, which by default is 27017. Then let's create a database variable here. So db equals client dot, and this is where we put the name of our database. I'm just going to call mine user login system. So I'll save that and then go back to models.py. And in order to use that database object in this file, we need to import it. So where do we want to import it from? Well, it's in the app.py file, and it's called db. So we can say from app import db. And then down here, we will say db dot users. So this is the collection within that database that we want to save this info to. And then we'll say dot insert one. And then we'll pass in the user object. So let's save this and just test it out. I'm using a graphical interface for Mongo called Studio 3T. And this makes it a lot easier to see what's going on as you're building out an application. So I do highly suggest you find some sort of graphical interface for Mongo. So let's refresh this. I'm looking at the users collection and we don't have anything yet. So let's go back to the sign up form and submit. And we don't get any errors. So let's check our database now. And there we go. We have a new entry in the database. So we have the user with their unique ID, the name, the email address, and the encrypted password. But we have a problem. Let's submit this again. We now have two users with the exact same email address, which we probably don't ever want to allow. So let's set up a little logic to handle that. Let's check that that email address isn't already in the database before we add the user. So what we'll do is a database query. So we'll say if db.users.find1. So if we're able to find one user with the email address of our new user's email address, then we want to return an error to the front end. And let's make this response have a status code of 400 to show that it failed. So we'll save that, go back to the front end and press sign up. And we have an error here. Email address already in use. Cool, but this isn't showing up on our form. So let's change our JavaScript just a little bit to make that happen. So we'll go back to scripts. And if there's an error, let's update that paragraph tag with some text. So response, we need to get the JSON from the response. So we'll type response JSON. This is a jQuery specific AJAX thing here. And then we'll get the error field from that response, which if we look at our models.py file, that's this. So the contents will be this. And then we also want to remove the hidden class on that element. So we'll say remove class error hidden. And let's test that out. We'll have to refresh here, resubmit our form. And there we go. We have an error. We cannot sign up again with this same email address. Let's do one more thing in models py here. Let's make the default response an error if it happens to get all the way to the bottom. And then let's put the insert statement into an if. And for now, let's just return a successful object with the user. So let's read this from the top. First, we will create a user object from all of the submitted fields. Then we'll encrypt the password. Then we'll check if there's already a user in the system with that email address. If so, we'll error and not execute any further code. We'll just error out right here. Otherwise, we will try to insert the new user into the database. If that's successful, we'll return the user object to the front end, which will change this in a little bit. This is just temporary. And if it somehow gets past all of this, let's just return a generic error that something went wrong. All right, that's it for this video. Thanks for watching.